evening. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay out there in the gallery, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Carlson with us on Zoom this evening. I have to read this little housekeeping rule. It's a call to order, single public hearing. The public hearing is being held pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act. All members of the public will be given a reasonable time to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that is the subject of this hearing. All information, correspondence, petitions, and reports that have been received by noon today concerning the subject bylaw have been circulated to council and are available to the public as part of the meeting package. Hearing process. Staff will provide their report, followed by the opportunity for the applicant to speak. Members of the public who have pre-registered to speak have been added to the speakers list in the order requests were received. Those pre-registered will be provided with the opportunity for a public comment according to the order of the speakers list, followed by comment of those who have not pre-registered. Anyone who has not pre-registered can still attend council chambers and wait to speak following those on the speakers list, or alternatively can electronically participate by calling conference line during the live hearing at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Speakers will be asked to state their name and civic address. Please note that all representation, whether written, verbal, or electronic, are available to the public for viewing as part of the public record. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker and should include all the relevant information in their presentation. Further opportunity will be afforded to all members of the public to speak a second or third time with new information only, once all persons have had an opportunity to speak. Council may ask questions of staff, the applicant, and the public, but once the public hearing is over, no new information can be received. Council debate on the bylaw will take place during the regular council meeting following the conclusion of the public hearing. At that time, any questions of staff will be for clarification purposes only. The corporate officer will now provide information on the notice of the public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Van Elpen. So 2 advertisements were posted in the Summerland Review, issues of July 14th and 21st. And notices were placed on the notice board at Municipal Hall.
Thank you. At this time, we'll call on our staff, Joanne Peachy, to do the presentation.
Thank you. So the purpose of official community plan amendment bylaw number 2022-022 and zoning amendment bylaw 2022-023 are to provide updates to housing regulations in agricultural zones. These bylaws are based on the council's direction to allow carriage houses for more residential flexibility, site carriage houses within the farm home plate, and discourage the use of suitable farmland by improving the farm home plate regulations. Under the proposed OCP amendment bylaw, policies under the agricultural designation would shift from confining residential development in the ALR to farm residences to supporting residential uses that meet the needs, the housing, operational, and economic needs of farmers. The proposed OCP amendment bylaw also acknowledges that we have developed a farm home plate already and specifies that we're seeking to limit the impacts of residential uses on farmlands by encouraging siting on lower capability lands or confining within a farm home plate. It also adds a new OCP policy to encourage the use of higher capability lands for farming. Under the zoning amendment bylaw, this bylaw will remove user restrictions for additional dwellings in agricultural zones and amend farm home plate regulations. This will be done by removing the existing use of additional dwelling for farm help in the A1 and A2 zones and replace it with a carriage house use. And as a reminder, a carriage house is a secondary dwelling within an accessory building. So it can be a ground floor suite or could be located above a garage. So the same regulations would apply for carriage houses in agricultural zones as in any other zone within the zoning bylaw, with the exception that the floor area calculations would be slightly different to align with the ALC's calculations required for properties within the agricultural land reserve. To compare a carriage house with what is currently allowed in the A1 and A2 zone for an additional dwelling for farm help, carriage houses are slightly smaller in size at 90 square meters or 75% of the principal dwelling floor area. And they are allowed on smaller parcels, and they do not have limits on who can live in them. Carriage houses also don't limit the number of bedrooms or have restrictions on basements, and they allow for an additional height when located above a garage to allow for an additional height up to 7.5 meters. For farm home plate regulations, we are shifting to provide some more specific requirements by defining the shape to be four-sided, like what you would have for a typical residential lot. And we're including all areas for residential use in the definition of what a farm home plate is. So that would include areas like lawns and parking areas and patios for residential purposes. We're also taking temporary farm worker accommodation out of the mix for a farm home plate. The proposed amendment bylaw includes 3 siting options for creating a farm home plate. So you can either site next to the road, site on non-arable land as determined by an agrologist, or not suitable land as determined by an agrologist, or within an existing farm home plate if there's already a dwelling established on the property. The overall size of the farm home plate is staying the same for properties that only have 1 dwelling. And we're proposing to only have 1 standard, so the size of the farm home plate would not increase with an additional dwelling or carriage house like it does currently. But we are looking to do more within that home plate size by allowing for increase in coverage from 35 to 45%. In this example, you can just see the farm home plate just showing a principal dwelling, carriage house, and accessory building. Under this example, you would have coverage that would be including any accessory buildings on the property, the carriage house, and the principal home. And 45% coverage of the farm home plate equates to 407 square meters in the A1 zone and 540 in the A2 zone. So just in summary, these proposed bylaws will align more closely with the ALC permissions to allow for 90 square meter additional dwellings without seeking further permission from the ALC. It also would be limiting encroachment of residential uses through a more refined definition of what the farm home plate is, and providing more flexibility as to the use of additional dwellings by lifting the user limitation. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Corporate officer, at this time, do I go to the speakers list? Thank you. We have 1 person on our speakers list, Mrs. Denise McDonald. Would you like to come and speak at the podium? Thank you.
Thank you, council members, for trying to digest this business of housing on the farmland. I've been trying to figure out all the different ramifications of these housing policies. There's two separate issues here. The carriage houses, which is in line with the ALC. The temporary farm worker housing, I find a few gaps. For clarification, our Ag Advisory, we did have a workshop that the staff put together, but we had limited time to discuss or consider the ramifications of the proposed zoning regulations. I don't think they had developed them too much. This was in April. And there was concern from the farming community. We had a little informal barbecue. I guess it was illegal, but it was outside of the AAC meeting. And we collated all the different concerns, and it was basically neighborhood driven. There's different problems in different neighborhoods, too much traffic or something like that. So that's in the letter that I posted on your website. But tonight, I'm just going to make a couple of recommendations. That one, that you make an effort in the next 6 months to engage a greater capture of the farming community, so that there's clarity with the farmers from a full spectrum. Our Ag Advisory is small, and there's, I think, 3 vintners and 1 journalist, and I think 4 fruit and vegetable producers. There's more to agriculture than that sits on our Ag Advisory table out there, and it's hard to get people to engage, especially after this pandemic business, but it would be worth our while to put the effort in. Don't make any rash decisions today. There's more conversation that's needed. I don't pretend to know all the answers. It's a difficult subject because there's 3 different documents that you have to kind of cross-reference what's needed. Staff have tried to do a reasonable job, but I consider this whole topic of the temporary farm worker housing a hot potato. The Land Commission does not want to be responsible for compliance. It will be our regional districts and our municipalities who will be responsible for compliance. And I don't think that you and many in the community want the community to have to be responsible for ALC policy. So we have to be careful. So that's the main recommendation, to have more conversation. Under the guide for bylaw development in farming areas, ALC 2.4.9.6, farm residential footprint or setbacks. It's my opinion that staff have not detailed the temporary farm worker housing requirements according to the minister's bylaw standard. In the presentations, most of the time, the temporary farm worker housing is kind of floating in the orchard. The farmer can decide where he will put it, but in fact, I don't know if I can find it. Sorry, it's a hot summer's night, and this is the wrong time to be doing this work. Okay, so under the minister's bylaw, if a local government uses the farm residential footprint or home plate, which in one of, I think it was the first and second public hearing that the question was asked, does the Land Commission use home plate? And the answer was no from staff. Well, in fact, they do. It's called farm residential footprint. So if we use home plate or the farm residential footprint concept in our bylaws, all accessory farm residential facilities, including the temporary farm worker housing, must be on a declared home plate and contiguous to a home plate of an existing residence, unless authorized by a development various permit. So I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know proper process, but I'm thinking that whatever bylaws you come up with, we should have that detailed, that a development variant permit is required, because I didn't see anything referencing that.
Excuse me, Denise.
Yeah, am I over 5 minutes already?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
but there's nobody else to talk.
Sorry.
Okay, ask, and then I get another 2 minutes? I won't be long.
How's the process?
I would recommend to ask if there's anyone else in the public that wants to speak, and should they not, then you could afford a second person to speak.
You have
as
to
long
be
as they bring
registered to
forward-
speak?
Yeah, registered, and then as long as they bring forward no more new information, or they bring forward new information, not old information.
Okay. Do we have anyone else registered to speak this evening? Please state your name and your address, please, sir. Thank you.
My name is Murray Roney. I reside at 12018 Gallagher Street. At the time of writing this document, it is my belief that the District of Summerland does not have the authority to override existing provincial legislation, making both bylaw amendments non-starters. I'm unaware of any legislation, legal precedent, or other basis to supersede provincial legislation, specifically the Agricultural Land Commission Act and related regulations. The community charter states under Division 2, Section 10, Subsection 1, a provision of a municipal bylaw has no effect if it is inconsistent with the provincial enactment. Staff have identified that the amendments are based upon demand for existing property owners in lands zoned A1 and A2 for greater residential housing flexibility. How many requests have actually been received and in what time period? Can that number be verified? How many properties in the District of Summerland are zoned A1 or A2? As staff did not quantify the demand versus the total population, I'm left wondering what the majority of landowners really want. I have concerns about the enforcement of bylaws as well, that they will be done in a timely, efficient, and consistent manner. Will staff be available to come and shut down 2 a.m. parties by vacationers after the RCMP have gone home for the night? People buying land zoned A1 and A2 knew or should have known that what was permitted in the way of residential development. Anyone asking for amendments after buying the land is seeking profits over maintaining the character and quality of the agricultural lands, which I remind you is now and has always been one of the primary things appreciated about Summerland by residents and tourists alike. I personally have been harassed multiple times because of farming activities, dust raised by riding my horses, an allowable agricultural activity, and by the use of pesticides on my property, even when applied by a registered and licensed pesticide application company, also an allowed agricultural activity. To provide safety and ensure that qualified personnel were involved, I've spent more than $6,000 in hiring professionals to address my weed issues. Weeds were brought under control, and the plan was to do an annual pass to maintain the high level of control. With the rapid spread of a new pest this year, Horia lissum, a weed that can cause severe health consequences to horses, we requested our supplier to spot spray our property. A neighbor threatened the licensed professional with complaints to BC Environment and BC Agriculture and the district. Even though this company would have been vindicated by any investigations, the process of being investigated is costly and time-consuming. The company facing such complaints and the prospect of future investigations has indicated that they will no longer provide weed control services to me. It took me a long time to find a company willing to service a small piece of agricultural land. If I'm unable to find another licensed applicator, and I haven't yet, I will have wasted all my money to date because of friction with people who don't understand what agriculture is about. In conclusion, until proven to the contrary, Bylaw 2022-022 and -023 are not within your authority to promulgate. Secondly, I ask Council to recognize what former Mayor Perino and Council failed to recognize, that agricultural lands are a limited quantity treasure, and that once residential development occurs, they are depreciated or lost forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Corporate officer, anyone else?
No one registered, but you can ask the gallery if anyone new
Anyone
would like.
else would like to speak? Please, sir, take the mic and state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Booth. I live 7515 Switchback Road. I'm questioning, I have not seen anything in the write-up about sewage or septic. And I'm presuming that most of the properties that are going to take advantage of this situation will be rural, no sewer. And so I would like to know what rules are going to be put in place for sewage. A number of years ago, my understanding was that the municipality made a ruling that there could only be one sewer system per hectare, and that was because the provincial government had a directive that if Summerland wanted further economic help on its sewage situation, then they had to adopt this 1 hectare rule. So if anybody can tell me what the minimum size is for a septic system and how much it's going to cost, I would really appreciate that. I have 3 neighbors in my general area that have had to put in septic systems that have cost over $40,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, anyone else? Marianne, please.
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. So I just want some clarification. I spoke with the development officer on Friday because I was having trouble understanding home plate coverage and everything. So at 35%, that's for both A1 and A2. Now, when you measure them out in square meters, the 905 square meters translates to 9,741.34 square feet for the A1 and 12,916.69 square feet for A2. And on the home plate, that allows for garages, sheds, pools, and carriage house. And anything that is agriculture, as far as the auxiliary building, is exempt for that. But that takes up another 10% of the property, according to Mr. Dolovet. And that would include your tractors, your barns, and your sheds. And the temporary housing is, again, a separate issue. So taking the auxiliary buildings and the temporary farmhouse worker accommodation out of the home plate, I fail to see the need to increase the home plate usage. Or, you know, do you want it to look like property that's next door to the cemetery? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first time? Denise, please.
Just one more point. So further to the minister's bylaw standards, if the existing buildings, and then we're talking the temporary farm worker housing, if the existing buildings are outside of the declared farm residential footprint, they become legally non-conforming and owners may apply for a development variance permit. ALC requires application for temporary farm worker housing, and they decide if needed for the operation, if it is a third residence. So you don't automatically get a carriage house and temporary farm worker housing. And also nowhere did I see, and maybe this comes later on with the permit or the regulations, the ALC requires covenants and financial securities. And I'm assuming that the financial securities is to remove the temporary farm worker housing if it's no longer needed. And that's another thing, the temporary farm worker housing, I thought that had to do with temporary seasonal workers, but it actually talks about the building. It's temporary. So it's an important distinction to make, and it's definitely not clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for the first time. Second. Sir.
Just one more thing that I forgot to mention is I asked about the water usage for the carriage houses. And I was told that it was the expectation that all the carriage houses would be on municipal water supply with treated water from the water treatment plant. And if that's the case, it's my understanding that right now during peak usage that the water plant is having trouble keeping up. And if there is a large number of carriage houses built, what is our likelihood of exceeding the capacity of the existing plant? Thank you.
Thank you for the first time, second, and third. I'm going to close this meeting. Sorry, no? Oh, sorry, council, do you have any questions? Councillor Holmes, please.
Is this the time to ask staff for clarification, or is that when we discuss it? No? Okay, yeah, just a couple things to clarify. So the temporary farm worker housing, that refers to, it's a temporary building, correct? And that it's temporary residences in that building, or can somebody live there year round?
The temporary farm worker accommodation is referring to accommodation for temporary farm help. And that is something that does require application to the ALC, even though it is listed as a permitted use in our agricultural zones. It is required by the ALC for their approval. Under the ALC, they consider, as Denise mentioned, they typically require covenants and conditions that require a removal of the building after the use is permitted. Our bylaw is not as specific in terms of defining temporary farm worker accommodation, except that it is to support temporary farm workers.
Just to follow up then, so do either our bylaw or the ALC regulations allow for year-round accommodation in a temporary farm worker accommodation?
I believe that it's restricted under the ALC, and that would be something that I would want to confirm with our bylaw, but being temporary farm worker accommodation, I don't believe that it would be permitted for year-round use. But I would want to confirm with the zoning bylaw.
Any other questions, Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you, Chair Van Alphen. One of the points here I wasn't clear on, and if I am clear, then I sort of want to get an explanation. We're going to remove the gross floor area maximum for accessory buildings. And is that for farm accessory buildings that are not on the farm home plate?
No, there is a 10% allowance for farm buildings outside of the farm home plate. The accessory buildings, we're restricting the residential accessory buildings to a maximum of 100 square meters. So essentially by removing that requirement, there's just more flexibility as to whether you have a larger accessory building, a carriage house, or a larger primary house within that farm home plate. Limited to the 45% coverage of the farm home plate.
Follow up, Councillor Barkwell?
Yeah, thank you. So if I have a farm building, not on the farm home plate, but say a barn, is there any limit to the size of the barn or greenhouses or other accessory buildings I might put on the farm home plate? Or not the farm home plate, forget the farm home plate, I mean the rest of the acreage.
It's a 10% lot coverage.
So 10% of the lot, so if it's a 10-acre lot, I could put a 1-acre building?
Yes, it's just the 10% of the total lot coverage. So it is proportion to the size of the lot.
But there is a limit to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is something that's in the bylaw now, that there isn't any proposed change to that requirement for the farm buildings. That's a separate item within the
Okay, I think
the
that
bylaw.
just reading one of the letters we received, I got the impression from that letter that we were removing the restriction on farm buildings, but that's not the case then. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Patton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For staff, if I may, so some questions have been brought up about water services. So with water services, if we're looking at one property for one service, and if we're going to be running the main dwelling unit, we're going to be running a carriage house or secondary dwelling, we're going to be also could have temporary farm worker accommodation. My question is could there be a service upgrade that would be required on the municipal side to upgrade the water services to be able to supply the amount of demand that's going to be required for 3 dwellings, plus any farm buildings that are serviced?
Thank you. So when I put that question to our Public Works Department, they had their water consultant provide just some information back, and essentially what they advised was that the amount of additional demand increase based on agricultural properties building carriage houses would be something that would be very small and wouldn't change the overall water supply characteristics significantly. And they put a percentage of about a 1.15% increase in demand if all of the agricultural properties had an additional carriage house on. So they were essentially saying that it was something that wasn't significant, and that the impacts would be fairly low on the water system based on their initial analysis. So that.
Follow-up, Councillor Patton.
Thank you. Do you know if they modeled including a temporary farm worker housing on that property? Only for the fact is, if you're running a temporary farm worker housing, you could have multiple bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, you could have washers. So I'm just wondering if when they did the modeling, if they actually took into consideration a carriage house and a temporary farm worker accommodation.
Yeah, so it wasn't property specific. They were looking at the overall water supply and essentially what the effect of allowing for additional carriage houses would be, and found it to be small. It's quite possible that there might be individual pipes that could require upgrades for specific lots, depending on how they're serviced. But they were looking at the overall water supply in the community and the impact of the additional carriage houses on agricultural properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Trainer.
Just to follow up on what Councillor Patton said, we had a couple questions about sewer and/or septic concerns. Was there any comments on that at all in terms of impact?
So just in relation to what was brought up, so carriage houses are under our bylaw, and this would be true if they came into effect on agricultural lands. There is the 1 hectare rule when they're not connected to community sewer, and that 1 hectare rule would not change. So the property must be 1 hectare or more in size in order to have a carriage house under the zoning bylaw. And it is correct to assume that most, if not all, agricultural properties would be serviced by on-site septic, and that those septic systems would be designed by a registered on-site wastewater practitioner and in accordance with interior health regulations. So it would be something that individual property owners would be designing and paying for additional septic servicing for the additional carriage houses.
So when a carriage house was proposed to be built, the septic system then would have to be inspected, you're saying, to ensure that it could accommodate that new building in addition to the other main principal residence?
Yes. So if they were to tie into an existing on-site septic system, that would constitute an increase in demand. So they would have to have a rope that would essentially be assessing that system and whether it was able to accommodate the additional load requirements. And there might be upgrades that would be required as part of that process. Some are over-engineered and have capacity to take on additional bedroom demands, and others don't. So it would depend on individual septic systems and what they were originally designed to accommodate and whether they would need improvements.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, because the concern has been expressed to me, if an individual who wanted to add a carriage house or a temporary farm worker accommodation on their property didn't have adequate flow or even electricity for that matter, they are responsible for the cost of any upgrades?
That's correct.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joanne, can you tell me, it's a segue from Councillor Trainer's question. As far as the septic systems go, do the septic systems have to be included in the home plate, or can the septic system be outside of the home plate on the farmable lands?
The septic system wasn't specified in the definition of farm home plate, so it's something that could be outside, but they will be something that would be close by to the residential development in order to service it.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. I think it might be for the corporate officer. My understanding is that this bylaw is being done partially to satisfy the demand, but also because the ALC has put in this new regulation as of January 1st of this year that allows farmers, landowners throughout the province to build this secondary dwelling without calling it what we used to do, which would be farm worker housing. Mr. Roney came to the podium and suggested that the district doesn't have the right to actually make this bylaw. And I'd just like some clarification, please, to ensure that what we're doing is simply to bring our bylaw into a place where it matches the ALC, and it is something that the district can and will be able to enforce.
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, without seeing or having the amendments that the ALC has made in front of me, normally the provincial legislation will set the overall policy, and it'll be up to the municipality to set the certain regulations within the overall structure that they've given.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that then, so when this bylaw gets created, I know it's gone to the Ministry of Agriculture for comment. Does it go to the ALC to ensure that it is compliant, or is it just at the ministry level that we make sure the words are right and that we are following what the ALC Act allows us to do?
Yeah, so through the chair, I can answer that question. So yes, this bylaw was referred to the ALC as well as the Ministry of Agriculture. They did not have any major concerns with the bylaw. They thought that it was generally compliant. They did provide some comments specifically about their floor area calculations under their regulations, and we have adjusted the bylaw accordingly to match to match their comments. And just in terms of the previous comments about not having authority, I just want to comment that it is correct that the ALC does override local zoning bylaws for farm uses through their act. And then there are other elements like residential uses where the local government in alignment with the ALC can create their own rules. So you're also correct that the general thrust of this bylaw is to try to align with what the ALC allows, which is the one principal dwelling plus 90 square meter additional dwelling without further permission from the ALC. And this bylaw does align generally with that permission, and is actually probably just a touch more restrictive than the ALC, which is something that is completely within our authority to adopt.
Thank you. Mayor Boot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joanne, I just have a question about the adoption that we had earlier in this year, where we were talking about the opportunities for agritourism accommodations and the rules and regulations around that. Does this what we're talking about tonight as part of this public hearing, is there any impact between those two? So if you choose, for example, if you choose to have, say, 3 accommodations on your ag land, or a single building that can accommodate 3 parties, and you want to have a carriage home as well, maybe for rental or for family members, does one impact the other, or can you have both on your properties?
You can have both. So there's the agritourism accommodation permissions are kind of standalone and separate from the carriage house permissions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question, Joanne, if I may. So, but those are camping sites, correct? Those spots for X amount of nights only with no services for the tourist accommodations?
The agritourism accommodation, the way that the bylaw was drafted, it's 3 campsites, but it also has a section that allows for agritourism accommodation within a building as well. It is something that, sorry, when that was put into effect, I believe it was last July, it was under kind of a temporary approval, and was something that I believe was intended to be brought back to council for them to further consider how the program is going and to make any sort of adjustments to that. So if this was to move forward and allow for carriage houses, that not the campsite specifically, but the allowance for the buildings to have agritourism accommodation could be something that could be reviewed.
Thank you. If there's no more further questions from council, I would like to hopefully do this correct. 1 time, 2nd time, 3rd time, I'm going to call this public hearing closed. And at this time, I would ask for your patience because I'm swapping seats with the mayor.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular evening council meeting of Monday, July the 25th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can attend council chambers in person. If you wish to do that, please register in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough room in council chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded at the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com/District of Summerland. And again, that's live or recorded. You can register in advance to speak during the meeting. If you wish to comment during the public comment opportunities found under items 8 and 15, you are asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and how you are participating, whether in person, by telephone, or through Zoom. And as you register, further details will be given to you. And fourth, you can request to speak during the meeting. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may be given the opportunity, time permitting. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate officer, are there any late items to introduce? No, none tonight. Okay. So council, could I call for approval of the agenda as presented? Councillor Traynor, Councillor Van Elfen, thank you. All in favor? Thank you, Councillor Carlson. And adoption of the minutes of the July 11th public hearing and the July 11th regular evening council meeting. Councillor Holmes and Van Elfen, all in favor? Thank you. Now, moving on to 5.1, the subject of the bylaw this evening for the public hearing, official community plan amendment bylaw number 2022-022 and zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2022-023, housing on agricultural lands. Council, if you have any questions to ask of Joanne or other staff for clarification purposes, please raise your hand and you'll get the opportunity to do that. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Joanne, can you explain to me, please, in regards to development cost charges that are based on carriage houses, they would be implemented on a carriage house through the DCC bylaw?
We don't collect DCCs on carriage houses or secondary suites.
If I may. What about the temporary farm worker housing?
That I would want to confirm, but I don't believe so. Most of the DCCs collected are collected at the subdivision stage. If there's cases of historic properties that have been historically vacant, when they have a dwelling unit come on to the property, then DCCs will be collected then, or for multifamily, that's typically done at building permit when they know the number of units being submitted. But I would have to confirm with the DCC bylaw specifically. So it would be temporary farm worker housing would be an additional unit on the property, but being there one already collected for a house, I'm just not sure of the application of that. If it's one DCC per lot or per unit in that case. But typically they're collected at subdivision and not collected for carriage houses or suites.
Councillor Trainer?
Joanne, can you remind me, would the tax structure change at all for a property? So if it's a farm, if it's a legitimate farm, but then the owner decides to build a carriage house and that becomes an Airbnb, does the taxes change for that property?
So that would, taxes are based on the BC assessment classifications. In terms of the part of property that is used for farming would benefit from the farm status exemption. Residential portions of the property are assessed as residential 1 under the under BC assessment, and then there's taxes paid on that portion of the property that's used for that particular use. And I'll look to Mr. Stat for any further clarification on that, because it's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Trainer, the key part is at the end of the day, we just follow the BC assessment. And we do exactly what their assessment is. So there's no discretion for us in that process. But in large part, what Joanne's described is the way it would typically unfold in the agricultural area.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just to clarify and ensure this is correct. So we're keeping a farm home plate, and if you already have more than 500 square meters of floor, you are not allowed to build secondary suite carriage house. You can't build this 90 square building that we're talking about. Just want to confirm that that is true, and realize that as this bylaw goes forward, we're talking about keeping our footprint small, continuing to reduce, or not reduce, but continuing to limit what is built and where it is built on agricultural properties. And if someone wants to come away from what the rules are, they have to come forward to ask for a variance regardless of where they want to go if it's outside of that farm home plate. So I guess my question is, if someone already has 500 square meters floor space, they cannot build another unit on their property. Just want to confirm that that's true.
Yes, so under the Agricultural Land Commission regulations, the permission for an additional 90 square meter dwelling is contingent on having a principal residence that complies with the 500 square meter maximum under their regulations. So they wouldn't have the permission under the ALC to do that. And in addition, they would be over our likely over our coverage calculations under the farm home plate. That would require not only an ALC application, but further variance to the zoning bylaw.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. And just to follow on with that, so if a farm already has an additional dwelling for farm help that's over 90 square meters, that would become a non-conforming permissible building. And should they ever then tear that building down to build a new structure, it would be limited to 90 square meters. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry for getting back to DCCs, but a carriage house is not in the exemptions of DCCs in our bylaw. So what it does talk about is that a building permit authorizes construction. And the only thing that's not, that is an exemption is when the building permit does not exceed $50,000. So I guess where I'm going with this, Madam Mayor, I think we need some clarification. We've had inquiries on the DCCs, and as we all know, the DCCs are what pays for our municipal infrastructures. So if we're going to have carriage houses, if we're going to move ahead with carriage houses or temporary farm worker housing, I think we need to know where the DCCs are going to be applicable, if they are applicable, because in turn, this is what's going to help fund any municipal upgrades that we will need within the district. So not to pick on Joanne, but I think some clarification is going to be required in regards to that. Anyways, thank you.
Would you consider bringing forward deferring this until we get that sorted out, or you know, how important is that? I mean, it sounds like it's something that's on your mind, but I'll leave it to you to let me know.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that the only time that exemption, if there's no capital cost, if there's no burdens on the municipality, then a DCC could be waived. But I do feel that a carriage house or a temporary farm worker accommodation does put a burden on our municipal services. And so I think there has to be some sort of recourse in which the municipality can collect those funds through the DCC process for upgrading those infrastructures. So I would look upon our corporate officer to find out the best way to move forward in regards to how we could get clarity in regards to this, but not stall the process. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Patton, I think if you seen that your clarification would have no impact on these bylaws, you could give them third reading, or if you think that these bylaws would need to be amended, I would ask that the question or the motion be deferred until information could be brought back regarding the DCCs.
So I guess where I'm going is that if we do find that the DCCs are applicable in this regard, I guess at any time that a building permit then would be applied for, is it that time that the DCC fee or the DCC charge would be brought forward onto that. So I don't, I just feel if we got clarification, but again, it's at the latter part of the process, not at the beginning of the process. So I'm okay with it. I brought it up for clarification, and but I'll see what my fellow colleagues have to say.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Barkwell and then Van Elfen and then Holmes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. 2 points here regarding Councillor Patton's comments. There has to be DCCs charged before there's an exemption, and it's my understanding, as Joanne said, that DCCs apply on subdivision. So if there's no DC charges for carriage houses, well, maybe there should be, because my second point is we've recognized this and we've talked about this before, that probably the next council should be reviewing all of our DCC charges, including where they apply and what they don't apply to, and how much they are, because we're sadly behind, out of date. So that could be part of that review and consideration. And I don't see it as any sort of a fatal thing to this passing this bylaw.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification, if I could, tonight we're talking about carriage homes. We're not talking about secondary, like farm workers accommodations. We're talking about carriage homes. Am I correct? That's the bylaw that we're looking at passing this evening. So secondary farm workers accommodations is a whole different kettle of fish, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say the DCCs that, you know, that's to do with the DCC bylaw, and we'd kind of address that when we reviewed that, but I don't really see it having anything really to do with this bylaw. So, and just to Councillor Van Elfen's point, well, this does have to do with farm worker housing. It has to do with, we're replacing the additional dwelling for farm help with a carriage housing, so there won't be that additional dwelling for farm help anymore. That's my understanding. Am I completely out of it?
I'm going to go to you, Joanne, because I'm wondering about that, what Councillor Holmes just said as well.
Yeah, so this bylaw takes the permission of additional dwelling for farm help out of the bylaw and replacing it with carriage house. So it is kind of swapping one permission for another, recognizing that an additional dwelling for farm help is right now user restricted, building up to 110 square meters, and we're proposing to have a non-user restricted building up to the 90 square meters, or the 75% of the size of the principal, whichever is less, to align with the ALC's 90 square meter maximum square footage, and the shift that they also undertook to not specify the user group within additional dwellings.
Thank you. Councillor Barkle, did you have another question? Okay, Councillor Van Elfen then.
No, just a comment, and that's, I think Joanne covered it there. It was, once upon a time, it had to be a farm worker or an immediate family member. Now the ALC says you can have it for anyone. That's all. That's what was passed December 31st of 2021 by the Agricultural Land Commission. What we're doing is just trying to catch up to their rulings. Thank you.
Okay, if no further questions of our staff for clarification, did you want to bring forward? Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The official community plan amendment bylaw number 2022-022 be read a third time, and that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2022-023 be read a third time.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Holmes. And further discussion, Councillor Barkwell.
One quick point, Madam Mayor. I've listened to and I've heard what some of the people have said, what Ms. McDonald said. There's correspondence from people in the business. And I think what they've identified as the problem that we have with all of our bylaws, there's no one size fits all. So while there are concerns raised, I think that we should move forward and that's the best we can do now, and there always will be and always has been amendments to these zoning bylaws as the world changes.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, again, I appreciate all the feedback. I think a lot of the concerns can be addressed outside of this bylaw, such as the DCC's question. We got a lot of good suggestions about the need to improve our signage and make an effort for residents moving into farmland to understand exactly what they're getting into. I think those are all great ideas, and I think we can pursue those outside the bylaw. And I think it's important to stress that our current bylaw already does allow for a second dwelling, and by specifying that it's only for farm workers, I've been told that probably wouldn't stand up if anybody challenged that in court. It wouldn't stand up, and because you can't zone based on occupancy. So really, our decision, when the ALCs or the regulations, what they allow us municipalities to do is we can either decide to allow a second dwelling or decide not to have a second dwelling at all. Those are basically our two choices. And since we already have, we've already allowed them, we have so many, I don't know how many out there, but by trying to get rid of all those second dwellings now, that would be probably an impossible task. And so I think the approach in this bylaw is good. I think it strengthens farming by reducing the size of that second dwelling, by reducing the size of the home plate. So I think this is, it might not be perfect, but I think it's a really good approach. And so I can support it. Thank you.
Okay. I'll call the question.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I just have a quick.
Councillor Carlson, can I ask you to raise your electronic hand?
Yeah, I'll
Sorry,
try and
I
find
might
it.
miss your hand, but if it's an electronic hand, it'll stay up there until I actually see it.
Absolutely. Just one more quick comment. I agree with both Councillors Barkwill and Holmes. And I think it's also important to recognize that the ALC changed the rules in December 2021 because they had changed the rules previous to that to disallow any secondary dwellings. And there was so much pushback from not just from landowners this time, but actually from farmers. And I think the burden on the ALC was massive because everybody was applying for these secondary dwellings and these farm worker housing, and it was a nightmare. And so this all came back around because people were finding they needed those places for their family members, for their relatives, for their friends, for someone. And it was the farmers that lobbied to get this rule put in place. And so I understand both sides of, why people maybe don't want this to be allowed in our community. But I do think that it may be the right time for us to follow the provincial regulation. And they took some flack for going back and forth on it. I know there's people that aren't happy that the ALC is allowing this to happen. Some of those folks, maybe they live in our community and they're not going to be happy that we're going to allow this to happen as well. But that's how this game works, I guess. And hopefully it works out for the best in Summerland, and people will respect their rural community, and people will be thoughtful and conscientious when they are living in rural areas, and embrace it and be grateful that we have such a nice place to live in, to be able to build and appreciate. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None, so that carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. Next up is the Mayor's report for July the 25th. On July the 18th, mayors and regional district chairs in the southern interior of the province met with Federal Minister of Public Safety Bill Blair to discuss, 1, what our local priorities are related to climate change emergencies, and 2, how the federal government can better assist in preparing. On behalf of Council, I spoke to the need to ensure access to reliable wireless networks to relay consistent and regular communications to residents, regardless of their location. The district's Voyant alert system is ideal for transmitting emergency and non-emergent information, but of course relies on wireless networks. Many participants spoke about the need for increased and more immediate federal funding for recovery from climate change impacts, but also to adapt and prepare for future impacts. I added that funding for design work would be helpful because typically grant applications required submissions of shovel-ready projects. Thank you to the CAO for assisting me with that discussion. On Tuesday, July the 19th, most of Council attended the event to mark the completion of repairs to the outlet pipe at Isentalk Dam. District Water Utility Staff, CAO Stat, MLA Ashton, the project general contractor and engineer, and Okanagan Basin Water Board Executive Director Anna Warwick-Sears also attended the ribbon cutting. The project, which was funded by the provincial and federal governments through the Investing in Canada Fund and by the District of Summerland through capital reserves, came in under budget. Budget discussions later this year will consider allocating funds to widen the spillway at Isentalk Dam. Both projects increase dam safety and contribute to ensuring appropriate water levels for humans, fish, agriculture, and firefighting during drought years and times when there is increased precipitation. Following the Ice and Talk Dam event, Council had the opportunity to go on site to see the work recently started on the reconstruction and water main replacement placement on Giants Head Road. This project, using borrowed funds approved by Summerland residents through the alternative approval process, will also see extension of the existing multi-use path from Harris Road to Gartrell Road and some widening of the roadway from Giants Head Road to Hilborn Street to further accommodate bicycle traffic. Next Monday is a civic holiday in BC and many other jurisdictions in Canada. Historically, many people travel on this long weekend, including within the Valley. If you're one of those people, please be careful on the highways and roadways this BC day. Enjoy the weather and stay safe. And before I close off tonight, I would like to thank Councillor Van Elfen for chairing the afternoon meeting and the public hearing for me today as I was traveling back from Victoria. Thanks very much, Councillor Van Elfen. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. Since my last report to Council, the district has seen increasing temperatures with the heat of summer arriving in full force. This week promises to see the warming trend continue with highs approaching the 40-degree mark. With heat comes increased risk of wildfire, but thanks to the wet spring this year, we started summer in a good position. However, we continue to watch it and changes may be forthcoming regarding fire restrictions from the district or the province based on changing indicators. Speaking of fires, we had a fire at the landfill Saturday night, which our fire teams were quick to resolve. The exact cause is still being investigated. It is believed that improper disposal of waste materials, such as batteries or contaminated materials, may be the cause. There was no loss of infrastructure or structures at the facility. We've been using Voyant Alert and Facebook to ask the community to reduce water consumption on a voluntary basis where possible to assist the water treatment plant in meeting demand. By the end of the week, the plant was operating at 85% of its capacity last week. We've been following the recent council-approved water emergency plan, which includes calling high-volume water users who have put themselves on a voluntary list to assist our efforts. While we are hopeful these efforts will be successful in addressing the pressures at the plant, next steps may include further domestic water restriction according to our usual staged process, or further temporary restriction of major water users. All documents are on the website, and we will continue to communicate the situation as it evolves to the community. Lastly, and still on the theme of heat, I am glad to report that the new water bottle fill stations have been installed at Memorial Park and Rotary Park, and they've already seen a lot of public use. We've engaged the Chamber of Commerce to see if any downtown businesses would be interested in hosting misting stations for the public outside their business where that's feasible, and we're also looking at a misting station solution for the Memorial Park as well. And with that, I conclude my report.
Thank you. Any questions for either report? All right. Now we come to the first of two public comment opportunities. I don't see anyone on the list. Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak? All right.
Is it specific to any one of the topics or?
No, this is your opportunity to comment. But you're here likely to for the development variance, so that'll be the time on the agenda when you will come forward. No. Mr. Roney. Thank you, Mr. Roney. All right, on to the development reports, beginning with 9.1 zoning amendment bylaw water use regulations number 2022-024. This is for consideration of adoption. Does anyone have any additional questions for Joanne before we entertain adoption of this? All right, could I have someone bring forward the resolution, please, to adopt this?
I have a question.
Oh, my apologies.
Sorry, I just thought of it as you were speaking. I just thought of a question. I was going to raise my hand.
Please go ahead.
I'm just wondering if we might find out from the corporate officer how many pieces of correspondence were received regarding this specifically. I know that the next one, and I guess the next one as well, but this piece of zoning.
Through the mayor through to Councillor Carlson, we didn't have a public notice requirement for the adoption of this. So we would have received all of the correspondence with the public hearing. So for this agenda item specifically, we didn't receive any, but I'll speak to how many we received for the next one during that item.
Could someone bring this forward for adoption, please? Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None, so that carries. On to 9.2, development permit 413415 Lake Shore Drive, DP 21-024.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the district received an application for a lower town development permit with a request to vary the minimum side yard line setback within the WZ3 zone, which was just adopted. So this request pertains to a portion of Okanagan Lake at 13415 Lakeshore Drive. So lower town development permit guidelines were established for three areas, one of them being form and character, the other natural environment, and the other hazard areas. This particular piece of Okanagan Lake has no OCP designation, and it is zone WZ3, which is the intensive water use zone. This proposal is for a dock with 32 boat slips for private moorage, and part of the proposal includes partial public pedestrian access to a public seating area on the dock. So the dock extends 160 meters into the lake and has an L extension of 9.8 meters with all of the boat slips on the south end of the dock. And there's a 9 square meter public seating area before the boat slips. So this proposal was circulated for internal comments. Initial comments being that the waterfront concept plan was being developed and that it was seeking solutions for boats getting too close to the beach and the swim areas. And Lee's Associates, which is the consultant for the plan, reviewed this proposal in particular and suggested public seating be incorporated. So the applicants had provided plans for 2 public benches on the dock in response to that request. There was also comments from the fire department as this dock would need to comply with BC Fire Code and the NFPA 303, which is the fire protection standards for marinas and boatyards. So there has been some back and forth between the applicant and the fire department, and they did provide as part of their application and engineering letter for their fire considerations. And we're just suggesting that a condition of approval be written in to the development permit to ensure that the district fire department has the ability to require review of those finalized plans for fire protection because there is no building permit process. For external comments, this was reviewed by Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resources Operation, and Rural Development. And they confirmed that upon their initial review, they are prepared to accept an application, which has been submitted, and consider that to be 13415 Lakeshore Drive to be the upland parcel for their consideration. So under a separate development permit, the walking path was relocated outside of the streamside protection and enhancement area and includes an extensive replanting plan. So there's no changes proposed to that previous work, just with the exception of a small gravel path that would join the newly relocated public walking path with the start of the dock. So as required under the development permit guidelines, an environmental impact assessment was completed. And just to point out that this assessment recommends further study of the Rocky Mountain Ridge mussel, and this requirement has been included as a condition of development permit approval. This proposal is also seeking to increase the passive recreation by providing publicly accessible seating area on the dock via the waterfront walkway to extend the area that the public would be able to access in that particular area. And you can see that there's 2 benches within that square right before the dock would be gated and access for the boat slip portion of the dock would be for the private and exclusive use of the Oasis Development residents. So the public access portion would be for the first 31 meters of the dock, and then that area containing the 2 benches. In terms of the development permit, includes a request to vary the setback requirement under the WZ3 zone. So instead of the 10 meters from the perpendicular extension from the general trend of the shoreline, which is approximated in yellow, the applicant is requesting a 0.9 meter setback from the linear extension of the northern property line, which is shown in red. So essentially the 0.9 meters would be from the boundary between the WZ2 zone and the WZ3 zone that council put in place to protect the area directly in front of the Lakeshore Racket Center last year. And the WZ3 zone, which was remaining in front of the Oasis development. In considering this request, there are some contextual factors that because there's a limited area where a dock is possible in conjunction with this particular upland property. There is an existing crown lease area that encompasses the breakwater and marina that extends in front of the parcel. And there's also that northern limit that was established by the WZ2 zone. So this proposal is seeking to accommodate a fairly narrow design with boat slips all oriented away from the park and accessed from the south. So Staff is recommending issuance of the development permit with the setback variance to allow for the construction of the shared dock at 13415 Lakeshore Drive, which includes conditions of approval to ensure further review of environmental studies and fire suppression plans as part of the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Joanne. I believe that Ms. Butler is on Zoom to speak if council has any questions that they would like to ask of her. Robin is also in the gallery. Is
A point of order, Madam Mayor.
Pardon me?
Our rules do not, our policies do not have the anybody speaking to a development variance permit.
I'm not suggesting that they come forward. I'm just indicating that they are in the gallery or otherwise online if council has questions to ask of them.
Then they would be speaking.
They are allowed to, if council wants to ask them questions, council has the right to do that. If you want to ask questions, my assumption is you want to get an answer to your question. That is the interaction between the two.
We, well, my understanding, we had a discussion with this, but Kendra could maybe set me straight on it, that if anybody is to address during development variance permits, then it needs the unanimous approval of council. And if on a contentious issue of this, I would think that we would want then to have the opportunity for both sides to address council. If perhaps Kendra could comment.
Before Kendra comments, what I am stating, Councillor Barkwell, is that, and it shows right here in my notes here, it shows that there are 4 representatives that are available, so applicants are available should council have any questions. That is what I am just saying to council. If you have questions, they are available. Okay, that's what it says in my notes here. Okay, please go ahead, corporate officer.
Just to follow up with what Councillor Barkwell was saying, due to the fact that the staff recommendation is positive and it's recommending that the development permit be granted, the applicant is not afforded an opportunity to speak unless there is a resolution by unanimous vote of council.
Okay, so if council wants to ask questions, then we will bring forward that resolution. Councillor Barkwell, or sorry, Councillor Holmes.
Just for further clarification on process, so if a motion is brought forward that is negative, does the applicant have an opportunity to speak?
In theory, yes. Specifically, as staff, or I guess council was saying that the motion would be denied if that was the wording. However, I feel in normal practice, lots of the time, and it is up to the will of council, should one of the members choose to put forward that wording of a motion. But what you see more often than not is the motion would be put forward and then ultimately defeated. So the motion itself would be a positive recommendation.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions to ask about what Joanne has presented to us? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. So the bylaw states that it's a 10-meter setback from a perpendicular extension. And the request is a 0.9 meter from a linear extension. So I'm curious to know, is so we're comparing like for like, what would the variance request be from a perpendicular extension? In other words, how much of an encroachment to the upland property would it be?
I don't have that exact number. Essentially, the entire portion of the dock would be outside of that perpendicular extension area, regardless of, and then you would be adding the 10-meter setback on top of that. But I don't unfortunately have an exact measurement.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Regarding the public area that is, proposed in this plan, whose responsibility is it to maintain that in terms of the garbage receptacles and keeping it free from debris and safe for public to use? Does that fall within the district's responsibility or the dock owner?
Though it be publicly accessible, it would still be a private facility that the strata would be responsible for maintaining.
Great, thank you. A number of pieces of correspondence that we got, and Kendra, I'll ask you in a moment if you can elaborate on that. Speak to the dock being built in front of the Lakeshore Rackets Club land. And impacting the Rotary Beach long swimming. The questions I have are, could you clarify for me if the land where the Lakeshore Rackets Club sits is land that's owned by the Lakeshore Rackets Club, or is it owned by the province? I thought there was a lease, a long-term lease on that land, but I just want to make sure because the correspondence doesn't indicate that.
I believe it's leased land that the Lakeshore Rackets Club pays taxes on, but it is leased, and that is included in the comments from the Lakeshore Rackets Club in the correspondence that council received.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the Lakeshore Rackets Club themselves. I'm talking about the number of pieces of correspondence that we got referred to that as being Lakeshore Rackets Club land. Another question I have is looking at where Rotary Beach is, yeah, it's up there still. And the proposed, and I don't think it's put in line yet, but if you can tell me where the proposed, I think it's called a long swimming lane is, that fronts Rotary Beach and moves south. Are you able to speak to that?
Not specifically for the long swim lane. The current waterfront concept plan has some protection buoys along Rotary Beach to help with management of boat traffic in relation to paddleboarding and swimming and other things. And I would say that just in comparison, the map in that plan versus this one, those buoys would be somewhere around where that would be north of, if you took a perpendicular extension of the Lakeshore Rackets Club, it would start somewhere there around where the text is on that map.
Okay, a number of pieces of the correspondence we got spoke to that, you know, to the non-motorized, I guess, use of that particular area. And in fact, it looks to me like there might be a motorized craft right in this picture. So I think that speaks fairly loudly to the safety concerns that people that are using that recreationally might have. Besides that motorized craft being in there, I'm not a boater, so I don't know. Is it typical for, now I know they're on the north side, which I think is, sorry, on the south side. Is it typical for a boat to go like straight out from the shore before they cut it, you know, before they start to go south or north along the lake? Because I think that the concern that has been expressed is a valid concern, but again, I've never really piloted a motorized boat. Oh, Graham, perhaps you could speak to that.
Well, I have a 12-foot aluminum fishing boat, so I don't think my opinion counts, Madam Mayor. But what I can say is, first of all, on the question of long-term, rather long-distance swim lane, the exact terminus has not been decided yet, but Joanne's right in terms of some of the planning considerations. But as you know, the waterfront concept plan, it's a live document, certainly in that vicinity of that coming out on that point off the Rackets Club. I'm familiar with the points raised in some of the correspondence that you've identified, and one of them is that there would be a marina in front of the Rackets Club, which council will recall is not possible as it's been rezoned WZ2. So there could be some confusion on that point. The current proposal is also not a marina according to our bylaw. It's a shared dock for the purposes of this private venture. And that's why I had the image brought back up just for council's clarity. Also note that, and it's been mentioned in the presentation, but some changes were made by the proponent for the dock, and you can actually see some of the reconfiguration. So the way the slips are pointed, you would have boats coming in on the south side of that, so that it would hopefully and in all likelihood reduce a lot of the regular boating boats coming in and through on the motorized side. Obviously, you're never going to completely eliminate that, including people that are just going along the shoreline that have nothing to do with this dock, but the proponent did make some changes based on some of those comments previously in the current configuration.
Thank you, Graham. I have one final question and then I'll go to Councillor Traynor. Looking at the plan as it is before us tonight, it looks to me like the breakwater that is already in place there, that the dock itself, the dock that's being proposed, does not go, well, I have no really reference on how much further it goes, but it looks like it doesn't go substantially beyond the breakwater that's existing there already. Am I reading that properly? And do you know how much further that extension is?
Yeah, I would say that you are reading that properly, that it doesn't extend much further than the existing breakwater. I have to look at the particular plan to see if I can get an approximation, but it looks like it's only about the additional last boat slip area that would be extending further.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed that there are 16 slips along there, so there's 2 boats per, yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Traynor.
In considering this variance, I'm just looking at the neighboring properties, and I'm just wondering, does the Summerland Yacht Club, do we know, does staff know, do they have plans to expand at all? And do they have room to expand? Do we know that at all?
Can you just clarify the question as to, like you're talking about expansion to use the lake or their
Yeah, to add
land?
more like in the future, like if they're growing, do we know if in their lease or whatever there is any room for them to expand, or if they had like a plans to expand in the future. Like, I don't know if that's in their future growth plan, or if they're just they plan to stay where their size that they're at.
In terms of use of the waterfront, they were supportive of rezoning to the WZ2 to restrict any structures in front of their property.
That's helpful. I just didn't know if there was something in the queue that might be like in a 10-year plan or something, but nothing that we know of. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, my apologies. I thought you were leading up to introducing speakers, and then once you made that clear, we didn't need to, I could have waited for the discussion on process. My question for Joanne is, and the only way I can properly ask this question is to illustrate it, I guess, by stepping up to the image here. This property line would go to here. Right? So why is there not a requirement that the dock end 10 meters before that property line?
So the setback is from Oasis's property line, and then 10 meters from that, not from a separate extending property line.
You would have to be 10 meters from the neighboring property line, the property line with the neighbor. So that becomes a property line with the neighbor. And so you're actually extending in front of Rotary Beach. And I would think that when you are meeting up with a property line against with your neighbor, you have to be 10 meters back.
Okay, even if you extended that out, I do believe that it would be 10 meters from that extension.
So the dock would have to end 10 meters back from this extension.
Yeah, you're doing a perpendicular extension from that point of the property line, and then a perpendicular extension from the shoreline, and then 10 meters back from that.
So.
Thank you, Joanne. I was just going to ask if you could clarify with your pen there.
So this being the general trend of the shoreline, if you were doing that, you would be doing a perpendicular extension off of there, not extending this way.
My understanding is the dock has to extend perpendicular from the shoreline. The dock would have to be perpendicular to the shoreline, but the property lines continue on without any bends.
So the setback is based on the point of the property line being perpendicular, that point being perpendicular from the general trend of the shoreline.
Is that how we draw the property lines? I'd have to, that wasn't my understanding. So the property line between the Rackets Club and the Rotary Beach extends perpendicular to the shoreline there? That's how you interpret it?
That is what council requested, was the perpendicular from the general trend of the shoreline.
That's for the docks, and that's one of the variances. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? All right, could I ask someone to bring forward a motion, please?
Excuse me, ma'am. I have one question.
Oh, please go ahead.
To our corporate officer, can you tell me as in regards to correspondence, the yays and nays, if you've kept track of that, please?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Patton. So 161 written submissions were received, most of them being today, and 21 were in support and 141 were opposed.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. All right, would someone like to bring forward either the staff recommendation or a recommendation of your choosing? Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Question on process, if I may. So if the staff recommendation is brought forward, the resolution, and presumably if it's seconded, and then it's defeated, what happens next? Nothing?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Holmes, the application would essentially be denied.
I'll bring forward the staff recommendation. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Just before you do that, I just wanted to verify with our corporate officer, if that it comes forward and the motion is defeated, is there any recourse for the applicant in terms of reapplying? Yes. Could you please let us know what that is?
So just without reading them all, through our development approval procedures bylaw, there is recourse for an applicant to apply should their application be denied. They can, without reading it, and it'll just take me a bit, it's a 6-month wait limit that they would have to wait for it to come back, and they would have to make a new application, or they can submit something, I believe it's in writing, through to the CAO, that they would submit kind of like a rationale as to why the 6-month timeline should be varied, and then that would go forward to council to request to vary the time frame for the reapplication. Should it be granted, then they can bring forward a new application, I believe, but if not, that 6-month time limit would apply.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add to that, Joanne, from a development services perspective?
No, just to reiterate what Kendra said, that if the applicant, this was denied and the applicant decided to make changes to the application, they could submit a new application at any point with a different, say, variance request or a different proposed plan. But as Kendra also said, that if they wanted to bring forward the same application, again, there is a wait period under the procedural bylaw and an opportunity for them to ask council to waive that wait period if they wish to request that.
Good, thank you. All right, please, if you could go ahead, Councillor Holmes, and I think it might be a good idea to read this, if you will, please.
Okay, that development permit application DP 21-024 for the construction of a shared dock to be constructed on Okanagan Lake and in association with the strata development at 13415 Lakeshore Drive and legally described as Lot 1, District Lots 455 and 5085, Osoyoos Division, Yale District Plan 5896, be approved with the following variants to zoning bylaw number 2000-450, that the minimum side property line setback be 0.9 meters from the linear extension of the north property line protected into the lake and not 10 meters from the perpendicular extension from the general trend of the shoreline. of the north side property line protected into the lake as prescribed at section 14.3.5B.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Seconder? Does anyone wish to second this? Councillor Barkwell, thank you. Okay, further discussion on this? Councillor Holmes, please go ahead.
So we've been told by people who own units in Oasis that it was their understanding that the dock was already approved, that it's been something that was always going to happen, that it was always a component of the project. We've been told by the developer that this was always part of the original plan. But you know, if you go to the developer's own site, marina@oasis.ca, you'll see the original conceptual drawing. And in that, you'll see that there's no dock, no wharf, no marina of any sort. And that was the conceptual drawing that was presented to us 3 years ago when we were making the decision to rezone the property. At that time, members of council, including the mayor, members of the public, they was asked on numerous occasions if the rezoning, if the proposal included a wharf or a dock of any kind, and every single time we were told no, it did not. We were never even told that it might be considered later down the road. It was an unequivocal no. And we rezoned that property based on that understanding. It was told, if it was told to us at that time that maybe, you know, that they might build a dock, maybe we still would have rezoned the property, who knows? But it's impossible to say now, we will never know, right? And I think for the community to support development, especially large, high profile developments like this, we need to trust developers are going to do what they say they're going to do. And for me to now, 3 years later, sit here and say, oh yeah, marina's okay, a wharf, this is okay. 3 years after seeking assurances and receiving assurances that there wouldn't be one, I just can't do it. These are the reasons why people don't trust developers, and they're also the reasons people don't trust politicians. You know, so it's an issue that's, to me, it's an issue that's bigger than the single dock. And I could reiterate the reasons why people were concerned 3 years ago. They're the exact same reasons people are concerned today. We've received all the emails, and you know, so I don't think I have to go over that. But to me, it's that principle, and that's about all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think extending on what Councillor Holmes said, during those discussions, I remembered them, but I went back and I watched the videos, and I've watched the videos several times, and I'll make a supposition here that they were emphatic that there wasn't going to be a dock, and it was, you know, a lot of comfort was given to council about that, because it was obvious that that property, there was no place for a dock, no reasonable place for a dock. And that developer, the first person that came to us, was being reasonable by saying, yeah, you know, there's not gonna be a dock, there's nowhere in front. That property was bought knowing that, and at a discounted value, I'm sure, because there is a yacht club in front of it. The view is not as good, the ability to build a dock is not as good. So now we have a proposal where they want to go and basically, without any compensation, impinge on the area that rightly belongs to the Rackets Club, we have a letter from the president of the Rackets Club, and he represents 150 citizens in this town who say, hey, that's, you know, in front of our space. And we have to respect that. It just defies the logic to see this large dock over there. It just isn't practical. And the public has certainly spoken in no time at all. This came out in the agenda on Wednesday. It's the first any time anybody knew about it, unless they had seen about page 200 and something in the previous package when we talked about the regulations, which is the first time I saw anything about a dock. And I'm sure the public didn't know about it. So since Wednesday afternoon, we've had that much of a response from the citizens. I think we understand what Summerland's about. And it's, you know, we want to support development. We've done that. There's going to be housing there. There's housing everywhere. But those people that live here are going to want to have a place to go and enjoy a beautiful community. And I've gone through, I think I've gone through every one of those 140 letters. Maybe I missed a few. And I made a few notes of what some of the points that come up again and again. I think I've touched on a couple of the major ones, and Councillor Holmes has. Safety has come up a lot. And I gotta say, that's important too. Because kids will be swimming, the boat traffic increases. There's a limit to what this lake can support. I'm not against boats. I grew up on the water. We had 2 boats. I know it's good, but there's a limit here, and there's a place. There's a place, and this is not the place. There's the boating activity there right next to the Rotary Beach. And it's not, well, I don't know. It can happen. Happened to my own sister was hit and killed by a boat. It can happen. So that's one reason. Just one. Not everybody mentioned it. Some did, some don't. But I think the one that weighs the most on me is that this is the area that really is infringes unreasonably on the Rackets Club area. There's a setback. When I asked the Director of Development Services, I was a little surprised that they put in a regulation of 10 meters instead of 5 meters for the marina zone. He said, well, yes, we thought that marina zones such as this would increase boat activity. A bigger setback is more appropriate, bigger than the provincial regulation. So it's 10 meters, and now they want to take it down to 35 inches. You know, it's just for not for the benefit of Summerland. It's for the benefit of a few. That's unfortunate, but you know, we have to think here at the table about the people of Summerland and the future and what this town is going to look like. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Any other comments? Councillor Traynor.
I just have a quick comment. I support what's already been said by the other 2 councillors. I think the main concern for me going forward here is that as we continue to redevelop our foreshore and developments become higher, like there's more density along the water, my main concern is that I don't think that there can be an expectation that every unit that is allowed to build along the water gets a boat slip. It's not sustainable, and we don't have room for it along our foreshore. And the lakefront, what we do have left is really important to people. It's public access, and it's like parkland, like it's something that people feel very passionate about. So I just think that, you know, I mean, having the Summerland Yacht Club, that's a public place that everybody can use. But I just think that having more private docks like this, there can't be the expectation that everybody can have their own slip. Like I said, we don't have room for it. And also, you know, the future of our lake depends on it as well. We can't continue to add more boat traffic. And we also have major environmental concerns for the quality of our lake water going forward. So that was just something I wanted to add.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Thank you. Go ahead, please, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you,
You're on
Madam Mayor.
mute. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all the citizens of Summerland who took time in most of them in the last 48 hours to reach out to council and make sure that their views on this project were known. We don't always get lots of feedback, and when things are really important to people, they speak up. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I note in the agenda that although has been an environmental assessment done, they speak to there still being a gap in the data on Rocky Mountain ridged mussels, something that not this council, but the past council committed to protecting in along the foreshore in Summerland. And well, I'm very appreciative of the adjustments that have been made by the developers to accommodate some of the concerns that have come out in the past. I don't see that the dock can be located in an area that doesn't impact the current and the historical use of this particular area along the water. One of the things that we as a council strive for, and this is current council and historically, is increasing the livability of Summerland is really our number one concern, whether it's transportation or like BC Transit, or if it's housing or parks and amenities, or improving our infrastructure. It's really important to make sure that we are supporting the community the best way that we can with the dollars that are tax dollars, and people pay for that. And so it's most important for us to increase the livability of the community as a whole. And while the anticipated owners of the condos down in the Oasis development certainly will be residents of Summerland at least for part of the year, we need to look at how that particular dock impacts the people that have lived here for a number of years, or people that have visited the area for a number of years, and how it will impact the livability for people that live here, but also for people that visit here. And historically, that has been a water playground for everyone, not just a fortunate few. And I will not be I will be voting against this variance proposal. Okay, anyone else? Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Madam Mayor and Councillor Trainer. It's these qualitative aspects that I have a hard time expressing, but which really the people of Summerland express to us largely. It's the the livability, as you said, the parkland nature of the water area, and that's the real consideration of a huge number of people, a huge number, and yeah. So just add that. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Any further discussion? I will call the question. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Okay, so that is unanimously defeated. Thank you, Joanne. Joanne, because Brad filled in for you, you're going to have to, you've got a lot of things on your plate tonight, so I appreciate this. I know that you've had some. Okay, so 9.3. There is an opportunity under item 15, I believe. Yes, the public media comment period is item 15. So 9.3, development variance permit for 11709 Mott Street, DVP 22-007.
Thank you. So the district received an application for a development variance permit for 11709 Mott Street. And this variance is seeking to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 6 meters to 5 meters. So this proposal is seeking to accommodate the relocation of the existing house on the existing 890 square meter lot to front onto Mott Street. So the existing house location is kind of showed in red, and the proposed new location is the blue there. So this is part of a larger development plan for the property, as there currently is a subdivision application in, as well as an OCP amendment and rezoning application that is active. So the variance is the first step to the overall redevelopment of the lot. So by placing the house at 5 meters, the building would be able to meet the setback requirements for the proposed new lot line at the back of the house and allow for enough, a large enough buildable area fronting onto Durrick Avenue so that the existing house can be converted into a carriage house in the future. So the overall plan is to have a principal dwelling on that parcel, and then the existing house to be converted to a carriage house once that house is built. The proposed siding in the house meets all of the other requirements under the bylaw, but requires the reduction of 1 meter to the front setback, which is currently off of Mott Street. In terms of the subdivision plan, you can see that here. There's an application for a 2-lot subdivision, and the preliminary layout approval requires that there are no encroachments on the proposed property line. So the house must either be relocated to be entirely on 1 lot or demolished because it's straddling the proposed lot line, dividing proposed lot A and proposed lot B. And OCP amendment and rezoning to our low-density residential intensification zone is required to allow for Lot B to be created because of the proposed lot size. This variance would facilitate the relocation of the house to a position where it could be converted to the carriage house on Lot A in the future. So if this variance moves forward, council will be presented with the rezoning application at a subsequent meeting. If this variance was not approved, then the applicant would need to decide whether to demolish the home or to really relocate to another area on the property that would meet the setback requirements, but likely would preclude being able to have a carriage house in addition to the primary residence. And it would preclude using the existing house for that carriage house. This variance essentially would allow for repurposing of the existing house, and the setback request is considered to support infill development in general. So this variance is kind of kind of tricky because it is a corner lot. So essentially right now, Mott Street is the front property line. If the property is subdivided, and that would actually change to be the exterior side because it's the shorter of the frontage. So in some ways, it's almost a temporary fix to allow for the relocation of the house, which is required for the subdivision, with the intention that eventually it would comply with the exterior side property line setback, which is only required to be 4.5 meters once the Lot A is created and the front property line shifts to the other street. So this variance would help facilitate that process. So it is staff's recommendation to authorize the development variance permit to allow for the front setback reduction from 6 meters to 5 meters in an effort to support infill development and the repurposing of an existing house. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Council questions? Just a reminder, this is only for the variance at this time. Councillor Holmes.
Is the existing house under 90 square meters?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carlson, do you have your hand up? No. Okay, any other questions? Would someone like to bring forward the recommendation? Councillor Van Alphen, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That council authorized issuance of development variance permit DVP 22-007 for property located at 11709 Mott Street, legally described as Lot 17, District Lot 474, Osoyoos Division, Yale, District Plan 20509, and that a variance for the following sections of zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. Front setback section 10.1.6 AI to vary the front yard setback from 6 meters to 5 meters proposed.
Great, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that a couple of the neighbors are not real happy with the proposal, and that's unfortunate, but really this fits with all of our community-wide objectives of increasing densification. So I think I have to support this.
Councillor Van Alphen.
I appreciate what Council Barkwell is saying. I also appreciate the fact that they're going to repurpose an existing home. They're not going to demo it. They're going to move it. What a brilliant concept. You know, instead of it ending up in the landfill, it'll become a secondary home for someone. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of the variance? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. On to item 12. And this is a notice of motion by Councillor Carlson, brought forward from the June 27th, 2022 regular evening council meeting. Please go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you see in your package, I've brought forward a request to try and engage the Ministry of Transportation regarding enforcement of speeds, potentially changing speed limits. I know that those have changed recently, and I don't think that that was for the best. I could read the whole background, but I believe you've all done that. Just want to mention that it was picked up by Castaneda in the last couple of days. I've received half a dozen pieces of correspondence of community members who are interested and willing to support this and try to see if there's a way to increase the enforcement and make it's not a very large area that we're asking people to slow down in, but certainly to make it safer so that people can cross our highway. I note that in the last couple of weeks, there have been some serious accidents at intersections in Summerland. There was also a report about how Highway 97 and Prairie Valley Road is one of the highest accident rates in this area. 128 accidents or something crazy like that. And a lot of that has to do with people not paying attention, but I also think that if there was better enforcement, maybe we have red light cameras. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know the Ministry of Transportation would be the people to talk to make sure that what we have in our community and through our community is the safest and best solution for this community. And all I ask is that we engage. I don't know what they're going to come back with. I don't know what the final solution is because I'm not a traffic expert, but I do know that people in this town are generally supportive of making sure that Highway 97 is not dangerous.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. You had a question, Councillor Burkwell?
I know that, I guess this is directed towards through town in general, and I know the ministry has all their, I don't know, data and studies and rules and policies and things, but I wonder, but sometimes pressure can help. I'm thinking particularly it took us a long time to get those flashing lights at the Prairie Valley intersection to warn people that there's a red light ahead. I mean, it seems like such an obvious thing, but I believe the council had to really push with the Ministry of Transport to get those installed because there's a cost. You spoke previously about the Jones Flat Road intersection. I wonder if those sort of making that a controlled intersection is a possibility. I might be, we might, I guess it'll be part of the conversation, you think, when we...
That would be the hope. So one of the pieces of correspondence I actually received this morning is from someone who farms, and they use the McDougall Bentley Road intersection, and the speed limit doesn't even change. People are still driving 120 kilometers an hour as they enter and they pass that Welcome to Summerland sign, and then as they come up towards Sumac Ridge, they start to slow down when they see the first 70 sign. But that maybe isn't soon enough. Those are the types of issues that I think need to be addressed. Maybe we need, every 200 meters, we need a sign that tells people what the speed limit is so that they get reminded. Well, maybe we need to have other ways of enforcing or encouraging people to slow down. It may, and maybe the intersections close to town with the lights aren't necessarily as big an issue as the ones going out of town. When you try and cross at Sunoka or at the Pacific Research Center, that one's been an issue for forever. People start to drive really fast as soon as they come out of Trout Creek, and they're already going 100 by the time they pass that intersection. And it's the same coming into town. People used to slow down to 70 going through Trout Creek, but now the speed limit's 70, so people slow down to 80 or 90 going through Trout Creek. So there's just little things that I think as our population increases and as people continue to come visit and be in the Okanagan, we just need to pay attention and make sure that there's a plan in place for that highway that we're involved in.
I have a question, I guess, for the CAO or maybe for Kendra, I'm not really sure. The motion that Councillor Carlson is proposing is to meet with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for the speed limits on the highway. In terms of the enforcement, is that a different ministry? Like, is that, not Attorney General, Solicitor General, Public Safety?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Typically, policy is separated from enforcement, and the Highway Traffic Division of the RCMP will conduct enforcement on that highway. So the sheriff's sort of branch will conduct that enforcement. Often their enforcement priorities are informed by government ministers through, annual dialogue or through strategic priorities, but it is the RCMP that on this stretch of the highway that does the enforcement.
So the first step is to get it in front of MOTI and have them make the at least consider the changes that Councillor Carlson is bringing forward?
Thank you,
And then-
Madam Mayor. I would say that's the first step because as was sort of indicated, there could be simple, low cost, no cost solutions to more signage, changing where signage is, other traffic calming measures, et cetera. And then if there continues to be, despite those things, the ongoing challenges, then it'd be the expectation that we would have to amp up enforcement. I have seen enforcement on that highway. There's been other complaints that have come in, and we've actually worked with the RCMP to see some additional enforcement on that highway. They've been quite responsive to that. But I think the first step is to see if more can be done to bring clarity and ease of traffic in those areas from a policy perspective.
Thank you. Kendra, no, maybe I'll ask Councillor Carlson this, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Trainer. The time has come and gone, I believe, for UBCM ministry requests. So with sending this letter, are you're hoping for some kind of discussion outside of UBCM, correct?
Yeah, at this point, I think that there's no need to push it to UBCM. I think this might be a bit of a bigger effort. A little late to start that for this year. So getting it going and seeing what the response is outside of UBCM would be fine with me.
Okay, and then just one other question for clarification on what you're proposing. So your proposal is to start, I mean, ideally, I guess, to start the 70-kilometer before the Bentley intersection with the highway and run it all the way through to, I guess, past the SRDC, like the Agriculture Canada facility?
Well, I think it's worth proposing that. I don't know, I don't know why we need to speed up to 90 in between, but maybe there's a good reason for it. Maybe, right? But I do think that we need to find out. I'd like to know. I think there's enough traffic at intersections and busy with the lake, what are they calling it? The lake house proposal development that's going in. It's going to be a lot busier in that 90 zone with the Oasis project, the number of units that are going to be coming on in Lower Town, people coming in and out of that intersection. I think it would be ideal if we just kept it consistent and people knew what the speed limit was, and then we had better enforcement of that speed limit. So yeah, at this point, but I mean I don't know how much of that needs to go into a letter or if that's part of the conversation that gets had.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that I had it right for extending it all the way through that area. Councillor Trainer.
I'll just quickly add that I live in Trout Creek, and during rush hour, which is the morning and afternoon, people in Trout Creek joke that it's like the Kelowna 500 through Trout Creek because it's insane. And I've also heard that since the safety barriers went in south of Trout Creek, that traffic actually goes faster now, because I think there's a subconscious feeling that you're more safe with those barricades in there now. And so people coming from northbound out of Penticton, they just like fly through Trout Creek now faster than what we've seen before. So that's just one comment. And so I do think that the speed signs need to start earlier before you get into Trout Creek. And like Councillor Carlson said, we're going to be adding I think 49 units at the north end of Trout Creek, and there's no light there. So there is accidents there. I've done our community cleanups there, and we're always picking up remains of vehicles there that have had accidents. So I think it's really important. And then finally, it is confusing, I think, for people. Through our community, we go 70, 90, 70, 90, 70, 90, and people don't, they just, barrel through. So I think it's worth talking to the ministry and letting them know. I'm sure they probably know about some of this stuff, but I think we need to talk to them again about it, and something needs to be done.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell, then Van Elf, and then Holmes.
Well, we've created a lot of discussion here. UBCM was mentioned, and I know it's past the date for ministers' meetings and everything like that, but I just wondered whether there wasn't a possibility of meeting with some lower level staff that who would actually be making these decisions. I mean, the minute, obviously it's not something we'd ever want to take to the minister, but maybe it's worth a phone call to set something up and have a little face-to-face at UBCM. It may or may not be possible, but I see Kendra's saying, well, try.
Is it set up the same way as it's been in the past, where it's kind of first come, first served, and you go to the staff tables? No. It's different this year again?
Just to clarify, we still can submit a request to meet with staff. That doesn't close until August 23rd.
I like your idea, Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Councillor Carlson bringing this forward. I live out in Garnet Valley. If I come up Jones Flat Road and I want to cross the highway, I usually have to turn right and go down to the light and then turn left and backtrack up into the Jones Flat area because trying to cross that highway is insanity. I think ICBC needs to be involved in this, especially at the intersection of Prairie Valley and 97 Highway. The amount of numbers of accidents that Councillor Carlson quoted, most of those accidents are people turning right to go to Penticton. They're yielding, and the next person coming behind are already looking north to see what's coming, and then they rear end the person ahead of them. And I have a farm and I do deliveries every second day into Trout Creek, and coming out of that fruit stand back on the 97 highway is you take your life into your hands. Thank God there's a center merging lane, because without it, I'd probably have to go to Penticton and then turn around, then go home. I don't know, but it's bizarro. It is bizarro, and I like the idea of 70 all the way through, because, Councillor Trainer makes a very good point, Councillor Carlson. The Landry Crescent development, the only access or exit is going to be at that little goofy road coming out on a corner. And there's been some horrific collisions there. We're not talking fender benders. You're talking people coming out of Trout Creek that were doing 80, now they're doing 100. They're not little fender benders. They're pretty nasty. So I think this warrants some serious discussion. And thank you very much for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So I can certainly support this. I'm sure most of us remember we did talk to the ministry at UBCM back starting in 2015, I think, asking them to review safety along that highway. And at the time they did make some changes. It used to be, the speed limits used to be all over the place. It was like 60, 80, 70, 90. I mean, it's like four or five different speed limits going through Summerland. And, I have read that whenever there is a change of speed limits on a highway, that increases the likelihood of accidents happening. So yes, maybe it's time for some greater consistency right through the same speed right through Summerland. My only comment, I guess, would be is if we are including the resolution in the letter that we're going to write, maybe from what I've been hearing, it shouldn't just be through Summerland's municipal boundaries, but also through and before municipal boundaries, because I think this idea that starting that lower speed limit before the municipal boundaries might be a good way to go. So I don't know if that requires an amendment, or it's up to the mover, I guess. Either way, I'll support it. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Carlson, would you like to bring forward your motion, please?
Sure, I will. And I think we can discuss municipal boundaries as part of this with the ministry and what those lines look like. So I'd like to move that council directs staff to draft a letter and request a formal meeting with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to discuss speed limits and enforcement along Highway 97 through Summerland's municipal boundary.
All right, Councillor Van Elfen, you're seconding. Okay, further comments? I really like, Councillor Carlson, that you've included enforcement, because that's key, isn't it? I mean, you can put up whatever signs you want, but if it's not enforced, it makes no difference. That's a really important piece, I think. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Did you wish to comment again, Councillor Carlson?
No, just thanks everyone.
Okay, great. Now on to the information items. We have 4 items there in correspondence, including Councillor Holmes's RDOS report. Anything that anyone would like to bring forward? Okay, and there are no committee or commission minutes, so could I have these information items be received for information, please? Councillor Holmes, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? Thank you. And now on to item 14, which is the councillor reports. Let's start with Councillor Trainer today.
Nothing to report tonight.
All right, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few things to report. The Summerland Sunday Farmers Market, I don't know if you call it farmers market is alive and well, very strong attendance. It's been great. And only one other thing to report, Madam Mayor. On July 19th, I had the pleasure of attending a Rotary Club meeting here in Summerland. I'm not a member, I'm a husband member, I guess. But there was a presentation made of a Paul Harris Fellowship Recognition Award and pin to our very own Doug Holmes in appreciation of tangible and significant assistance given for the furtherance of better understanding friendly relations amongst people of the world, for his leadership and participation with the Summerland Refugee Sponsorship Committee. And I just want to say congratulations again. Looks good on you. Thank you.
Yes, congratulations, Councillor Holmes. And I will go to you next, please.
Yeah, that came as a complete surprise to me. It was very humbling. And I was happy to meet with Rotary and talk all about the refugees that we've brought to this community and that we've sponsored and hopefully will continue to sponsor. Other than that, I have no report. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson?
Well, they're letting me report. We got a hot tip last week that the Prime Minister was in town. And I guess not everyone on council checked their email on time, but Councillor Trainer and 2 of her kids and Councillor Holmes and myself and my 2 kids, we made our way down to the train around 2:30. And we did get to meet the Prime Minister, and he had a really nice visit with all the people on the train. He also got to blow, there was no video of it, and I wish there was, but he got to blow the horn on the train, and he was so excited and so happy. It was pretty fun to watch. So that was probably the highlight of our week last week. And then just this past weekend, my kids finally caught COVID, but you wouldn't know because they're not sick. So we're just staying home and trying to keep everyone else safe. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Barkwell?
Nothing for me.
All right. Councillor Patton?
I will follow my colleagues and I have nothing to report.
All right, thank you. Item 15. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I'd just like to add something. For the record, I was holding Councillor Trainer's baby, and it wasn't me who made the baby cry. It was Justin Trudeau when he blew that horn. So that is why I quickly gave the baby back to Councillor Trainer. Thank you.
All right, so item 15 is the opportunity for public or media comment period. Sorry?
The one registered member of the public we had is not in attendance any longer.
Okay, thank you. So is there anyone else that would like to speak? Did you want to come forward, Robin?
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to just talk to a few points today. I didn't really intend to speak. I just was drafting some notes here. But my intent is to showcase that, essentially the application that we've made is based, on what we feel are facts and not necessarily ideology. I feel there's been some misrepresentation of or some misinformation to the community based on what we're proposing. And although I appreciate there was many submissions provided to council today, I do feel that we glossed over the facts that the precursor to a lot of these submissions were based on a misunderstanding of where the marina would be located and how it would otherwise affect residents in the area. We have intended and worked to alleviate concerns that all parties and stakeholders have showed, and that includes residents and the adjacent properties. The fact remains that we are compliant with the community plan objectives and policies for the lower town area of the community. The water is zoned and has always been zoned WZ3, which would otherwise allow this intended use. This has not changed since the purchase of Oasis. I feel the assertion, if that council knew that a marina or a moorage was going to be done at the time of purchase, only shows some significant barriers and hurdles that we were going to overcome regarding the marina. As council noted today in their notes, a lot of the information that you deal with is in a living document. And as a developer, it's much the same. Market conditions change, needs of the clientele change, and in development, things are always moving. I've noted before that we've always tried to be proactive and work in partnership with the stakeholders, and not in a typical developer manner, whatever that means. The hardships that we have faced to date, I feel, and as a development group, we feel are out of our control, namely the breakwater in front of the lands in conjunction with the new setback requirements, which provided additional obstacles to the WZ3 zoning. A 10-meter setback and perpendicular accounting when the WZ2 and the WZ3 properties intersect, to my understanding, affects no other property in Summerland except Oasis, a hardship that is unique to us. Based on our work to date and compliance to date and the hardships that are out of our control, not allowing the variance application, in our opinion, is unjustly punitive and prohibited to the intended development, a use which I stress was otherwise acceptable based on the current WZ3 zoning. Water rights in front of Oasis only became an issue specifically when Oasis applied, further displaying how punitive not allowing a variance is to the proposed development. As evident to submissions this council has received in the past, there is some strong people in favor for the proposed moorage. Let's not forget that there has been significant support in the past, and perhaps most importantly, administration has reviewed the documentations, submissions, and based on all the relevant factors, have articulated their support for that development.
Excuse me, your 2 minutes is up. Have you almost completed your comments?
Yes.
Okay, please continue then.
Sorry, I thought I had 5, it's only 2. I was gonna say, if safety is a concern, right now there is no safety provisions in place, and I could make an argument that having a moorage actually streamlines where traffic would otherwise go. It's worth noting, as a developer, we sent out the information in to all of our residents in meeting notes with the proposed amendments and all the documentations that were otherwise provided by council to make sure that all residents could make the most informed decision. We felt that sending out a Facebook post with some misinformation was not acceptable in a manner when we're looking at this proposed development. We will be looking at what options we have available to us, and if indeed we do choose to resubmit down the road, we'll look at that option. But I do appreciate your time, and I do feel it's pertinent and prudent that we do at least voice some of our stance on this matter. Thanks for the time.
Thanks very much. Anyone else? Please come forward.
I just have something positive to say. Oh,
sorry. Could you state your name and address?
Sure.
Please?
My name is Janice Hazlitt. I live at 7612 Happy Valley Road. And I want to make a comment about something that happened with us down at the Lakeshore Racket Club. We had a flood on July 7th. We happened to be having a board meeting there that day, and the water just started pouring in. So this was 6 o'clock at night. All the community services are closed, but I phoned a number on the website, and I got a operator, I think in Kelowna, who said, I will call you right back. And he called me right back within about 6 minutes, said, go down to the fire station. The fire chief will meet you there. There will be sandbags there for you. And so we headed down there and we got the sandbags and we started filling them up at the beach. And within about 10 minutes, the fire chief had asked someone from the, obviously, Public Works to bring a load of sand down to us. And we essentially were able to fill those bags and prevent any further damage into the clubhouse. And I just wanted to say how incredibly thankful we were, because you can't get insurance for overland flooding like that. And it just worked so well, and we were so impressed. And I actually meant to send an email, but I didn't even know who to send it to. So I just wanted to tell you, because I don't think you guys get a lot of good news. So thank you so much. That was incredibly appreciated.
Well, thank you so much. And you're right, we don't always hear these kinds of stories and notes of appreciation. So thank you so much for that. And I'm glad that staff responded. Graham has an incredible staff, and the Summerland Fire Department goes out of their way to help the services, or helped the residents of Summerland.
That was better than an email, so thank you for coming
Yes,
tonight.
it was.
And
it's on the public record too, because this is recorded.
I'll
So
pass that along to staff, Madam Mayor.
yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Haslett. Okay, anyone else? Marianne.
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. I attend council meetings on a very regular basis, as all of the council will attest to. And as far as the Oasis development goes, I was here when the proponent stood at the podium and said that there was no dock in the plans. And now they're bringing forth a modified one. And okay, I can see it, I don't like it, but that's beside the point. I still don't understand, when you have 24 units, why you need 32 slips. And also, there is the concern that the portion that goes from the land to the locked gates then becomes a liability issue for the District of Summerland. It would be different if there was gates at the beginning. That's all I'm going to say. And I can appreciate Councillor Barkwell's comments, because I was at the hospital when his sister, who came in from the boating accident, and it was horrendous. There's no other word for it. Thank you.
All right, any other comments from the public? Mr. Nasruddin?
Just for clarity on the amount of boat slips, there's the 32 proposed, there's 24 units on Oasis. We have a development part of the overall project that's called Pier 14. There is an additional 14 units that are available there. So that's where that 32 number is. It actually services a little bit less than the total amount on the proposed commercial. So just to add some clarity on that.
All right. I think we're done, are we not? Yes, we are. Call for adjournment. Councillor Patton, Councillor Traynor.